Why is it in this industry that some people don't make it? And why is it that some people will make it for 3 years or 5 years and then just not go forward? And then why is it that we've got people who've done it? I've been at it for 50 years, paying their bills successfully. This session is all about staying alive and how do you stay balanced and motivated throughout your entire career. The first thing that we're going to get into is the fact that the challenges that face someone who's been in this business for, say, less than 3 years might be very different than the challenges of someone who's been in the business for 7 to 10 years, 15 years, and then maybe up to 20 or beyond 20 years. So if you're just getting started in this business, there's a lot of different things you need to consider. First off was, what are the core motivation for you getting into the business in the first place? What inspired you out of either, God, I need the money, I need the flexibility, I don't want to work and do the same thing that my dad did. I don't want to be an electrician at the factory. Sorry, Dad. Or what is the core motivation that brings you in? So I find with the dozens of people that I talk to in this industry all the time, is that most of us kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't necessarily a plan, and the exception to that usually are the agents whose parents were in fact in the business. So they kind of grew up in the business, and they grew up watching mom have open houses, mom and dad doing whatever they're doing, and dad wasn't always available on the weekends, and dad wore a suit, and dad, put out all these real estate signs. They were always in the garage. And so culturally, you kind of grew up with that, and it became kind of a de facto thing. And, while you're struggling, maybe you went to college and to figure out, well, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a doctor, I want to be this, I want to be a fireman. The default position, maybe, you got pulled back into real estate, but you already had a really strong foundation, and you already knew what the struggles were because you saw the highs and the lows that your parents may have gone through, or somebody else, in your family that was doing it. And so these agents have a really good foundation for longevity because they realize that all that glitters ain't gold, and there's real work behind being an agent. But so let's talk about the folks that don't have that pedigree. You get into the business, and the very first challenge that's going to take you out is this. It's a heck of a lot harder than you thought it was going to be, because when someone handed you the brochure to get your real estate license, it didn't talk about all the difficulty and the complexities around prospecting, and I got to be a marketing expert. I don't know anything about that. And then I've got to be a salesperson. I don't know if I really want to be a salesperson. I want to be in real estate. What do you mean? I got to put out all these signs, and I got to go knock on doors. I got to make phone calls. I got to do an open house, or, I got to spend half my top end revenue for lead generation because I pay for leads. And my team members kind of screwing me over. My broker's not a very pleasant person. The office manager is not available to help me. And these are all the shock and awe things that happen right out of the chute. And so I think the statistic is something right around where if you get your real estate license and you don't do a transaction in your first 6 months, then the odds that you'll ever do a transaction in the course of your life goes to almost zero, which means that quick start is super important. If you're listening to the sound of my voice right now and you've been licensed less than a year, for goodness sakes, if you don't have a transaction, get on my calendar, hunt me down. I'll be more than happy to find that first transaction with you. But the truth of the matter is, you got to get wet. You got to jump in the pool. You just got to get into the activity level as fast as possible. So that first year reason, the reason you quit is because you don't have a deal. It's that simple. How do you fix that? Well, there's a bunch of brokerages out there that focus on this sort of thing, but here's the essence of it. The people that you're going to transact with, your first 5 transactions, they're already people that you know. And so they go on about, sphere of influence, sphere of influence. Well, yeah, there's people that you know, and there's a simple formula, and that is 6% of the people that you know who own property are probably going to sell their house year over year, and sometimes it's 3%, sometimes it's 8%, but it kind of averages out to 6%. So, hey, sales is a number game, but sales is not a numbers game. Sales is an active engagement game. The number one reason why you might not make it through your first year is fear of engagement. Fear of engagement. You just have to let it go. You have to just make a conscious decision just to go all in and not be afraid to talk to people. Not be, I don't want to call my best friend because they think I'm a salesman. Well, guess what? You're a salesman. Get over it. make the call, talk to your best friend. And let me tell you, when you do this, it's not about showing weakness. So many times in that first year, that first couple years, you're like, well, I was being a fireman, and now I'm going to be a realtor, and now I made this big change, and I announced, hey, I've changed, and there's a lot of interpersonal insecurity that comes along with that. And so, for gosh sakes, try not to make this an emotional concern. I know it's difficult. Just let go of the emotion. I know that if you talk to people that you already know and say, hey, I'm a realtor, I'm really excited about it, I would love your business. Do you know anyone who might be interested in purchasing a home? Now, here's the thing. If you actually adopt these basic things early in your career, then guess what? You're going to make it out of the first year, and the second year, and the third year. You're probably going to get to year 5, if in fact you can overcome that fear of engagement very quickly. Okay, congratulations. You made it to, say, year 3, and you did it just out of pure tenacity. You ended up tapping your sphere of influence, and then you ended up getting a handful of transactions. And then some of those transactions created other opportunities, other lead generation, and boom, you're up and running. So now you kind of figured out what the job is. It's, of course, not as easy as you thought it was going to be, but now it's a new environment, and you're getting used to the fact that, okay, I got it. It's going to be harder, but I'm going to grind this out. So you grind it out, you get to year 3. So let's talk about year 3 to 5, somewhere right around in there. If you're going to get to year 7 or 10, years 3 to 5 are really important, because that's about really refining your craft and creating system and process. Because what happens by the end of, say, year 3, 4, 5 is you might be doing so many transactions that you kind of come up against a wall. And because you've just been grinding it out and doing kind of the same thing you found traction with at the beginning, you don't have good method or a process, you're going to come up against a transaction barrier. And that is, man, I'm really struggling just to get 8, right? Or, I can get 5 or I can get 10 transactions, but you're going to come up against a ceiling, and you just can't punch above that ceiling. And the reason is you're doing the same things you did in order to achieve just the first sale, right? If I just get the next one, right? And so you're not thinking strategically at that point, many of us, in that process. So this is when system and process become really important. This is when you kind of take this hobby, this real estate hobby that is very expensive. It's an expensive hobby. And so it starts to transition into something that's more like a business in order for you to get to the higher production level to pull you up. Now, many agents never find this. Many agents just don't find this, and they just hang out in that place where they're doing 5 transactions or 4 or 6, like whatever the number is. They've kind of established a baseline, and they're still working through probably sphere of influence. They haven't developed a good methodology for adding additional leads to their database. They're probably not structured in their database. They're probably not structured in their follow-up. And all of this is fine. All this is fine. But the problem is, if you get to that point and you stop, you're going to be subject to burnout, because you're going to find it's rinse and repeat. Well, every day looks like this. Every day looks like this. And because you're not in a growth mindset, the growth mindset that you had when you first started was out of desperation. After you start kind of finding a firm place to stand, then some of that growth mindset goes away, because you start finding that you rinse and repeat. Well, if you're not growing, you're going to have a problem. So in years 3 to 5, it's all about system and process crafting. And by definition, a system and a process is something that's replicatable and measurable. This is where you really start measuring your effectiveness in your business. If you can't craft out system and process, then you're going to get to a certain number of annual transactions. You're not going to go past that. And if you don't do that, if you don't break through the barrier, you're going to be subject to quitting because you get burned out. You're just going to get burned out. You're not learning anything. You're like, okay, well, this is interesting. And, it pays the bills, but, actually I made more money as a fireman. And so it's less hassle, it's more simple. Years 3 to 5, system and process crafting. If you don't do this, it's going to be difficult for you to get your transaction volume up to a place where you feel better about years 7 through 10. And so through God's grace and His mercy and all of your power and your strength, you're in, year 5 or 6 or 7, and like these years are about crafting out system and process and method. And my gosh, look at that. You got a machine. You've really crafted out a machine. Congratulations. Congratulations. Because now what you can do with this machine is you can start adding other people. Ask other people to play with you. Hey, I made a machine. You want to go for a ride? And why would somebody else do that? Because you've mastered the things that they have not mastered or they've refused to master up to this point, which is system and process and method. And that's going to be paperwork flow. It's going to be prospecting and lead generation. It's going to be operations, and it's going to be marketing. These are the 3 things that you can have system and process and method around that's demonstratable. So somebody would say, gosh, it seems like, man, how do you get to 40 or 50 transactions a year? And say, well, let's have a cup of coffee. I'll sit down and talk to you about it. And perhaps you'd like to maybe consider joining my team if we're a good fit. What do you say, right? Because you've gone through something that they haven't already done, or they cannot do something that you've already done. You're attractive to them. Okay, as a leader, for goodness sakes, do me a huge favor. Don't disqualify Don't disqualify all of your hard work in crafting out your system and process. Now, your system and process and method might be very similar to everybody else's, but the difference is, unless you go through the work, you're not going to internalize it, you're not going to believe it, and you're not going to be an evangelist for your own system and process. Even though it might be very similar to everyone else's, it's yours individually. And the reason it works is because of your motivation and your belief in it, because you can point to evidence. Well, here's 50 transactions. I did it. I can teach you how to do it. Or you can come in my team and you can hang out and do 20 or 30 transactions, whatever your requirements are. Okay. Adding other people to your universe is really the beginning of really, really crafting a business. Many of us are going to work by ourselves. We might do that for our entire profession, but the truth is you're never alone. Okay, you might start with a transaction coordinator and an admin and then a marketing outsourcer or a marketing person. But even if you don't have all that stuff, guess what you do have? You have escrow people and title people, and you've got home inspection people, and you've got your entire preferred vendor list. So even if you're a one-person show, guess what? You still have a team. But year 7 and longevity, year 7 and after is really about not putting yourself at risk because you're coordinating other people's efforts. You start making a little bit of production, a little bit of money off the efforts of other people. Now, here's the risk. The risk is a lot of people will not punch past that because what they figure out is, man, I'm really good at transactions, but as a people manager, I kind of suck, right? So let's be honest. Not all of us are people managers. Not all of us want to be people managers. And when it comes to adding a team or coaching or training someone, maybe we don't have the patience because many of the skill sets we've developed to make ourselves successful in transaction land, well, maybe it just kind of really felt natural. Like it just seemed like I took someone's listing. It just kind of came together and it was great. Now, I have a process and a system for that, but I'm not really good at teaching it, right? So here's why that person might be at risk. So where the risk comes at that point is they start a team and they don't have great leadership skills, and they are not finding a way to get those better leadership skills through changing system and process, not around transaction and lead generation. You have to have system and process around leadership. It's a totally different skill set. So they don't figure that out, and what they do is they pour a lot of resources into their team, and they're not making any money off their team members, and in fact, they still have to do transactions, and it's their transaction volume that is subsidizing the business as opposed to the business paying them. They're actually paying the business so that they have a team and they have an office, and we've got all this technology, and all that's coming out of your pocket. And that's huge risky behavior because many of us, after we get into that mindset, it's difficult to let go. So what your risk profile is if you get into that position, you might ride that thing right into the ground because you have too much pride to take a step back and to reassess. I need to make a change. I need to grow. Because what will happen is you'll get to a point and say, well, man, I got these 6 people working with me, and it takes up all my time. And, before I had the team, I was making $500,000 in GCI. And now I'm struggling to keep the lights on because, my commission split in order to stay attractive to my team members is kind of out of whack. And I'm not really good at articulating my value proposition as a leader. And so when I don't want them to leave, so, I'll give them an 80-20 split on the team, or I'll give them a 90-10 split on the team, or whatever it is. For goodness sakes, my friend, take a look at what your annual income is and how many hours you're working. And if that number falls below the golden number, just $500 an hour or $300 an hour, whatever your standard is, get on my calendar. I'd love to help you break through that next level. You're at risk. I don't want you to abandon your dreams of creating a great leadership and a great brokerage with your great vision. What I want you to do is be very strategic when you do it. If you're at this point in your professional arc, then you've gotten to that place where you got a machine and you've added all these people and you got this transaction volume and you got all these team members and yada, yada, yada. Now you're in rinse and repeat. You might add other business components. You might start acquiring rental properties. You might purchase the building that you're operating in. All sorts of possibilities. However, we're going to come to a point where even though this video is about staying alive, hey, guess what? That doesn't happen forever, right? And so all of us are going to come up against, how do we successfully transfer our business to somebody else and still make money? Now, I happen to have a lot of coaching clients who are in this position, and there's some very fundamental things that you have to get out of the way. And the biggest obstacle that I find is I'll be approached by people who are deep in their career, maybe 25, 30 years in, and, they've done a fair amount of transaction experience. Every year they got 10 deals, 15, 10, 15, 10, 15. And technically they're trapped in probably a third year or a fourth year mindset, but that's what they've been doing for the last 25 years. They got to a point in the succession that we've been talking about, and they stopped growing. And so the best advice that I can possibly give to anyone within the sound of my voice, if you're at that place where you're nearing the end of your career or interest in being in the business, don't walk away from the money. Don't walk away from the money. The number one thing that you can do is ensure that you've got a very, very good database. It's important that you have an excellent database. Every day I stumble across realtors who've been in this business for decades, and they still don't have a highly organized database, which is something you should figure out pretty much on day one, I don't know, maybe day 2 of this business. What do they tell you to do on your first day? Well, put together a prospect list. Well, what's that? Everybody you've ever met, anyone you know who may or may not own a property, but I need their complete contact information. Oh, okay, great. So believe it or not, if you didn't face that challenge early in your first year in the business, that challenge never goes away. In fact, it hamstrings you each and every step along the way. And it's only through pure tenacity and horsepower that you're getting these deals. Now, if you do make it deep into your career, you know a lot of people, and you'll stumble across transactions because they'll just fall out of the sky because you have so many. But that doesn't mean that you're maximizing your database. It doesn't mean that, for every one person that you end up transacting with, there's probably 5 who chose not to call you. They stumbled into an open house and went somewhere else. Please do this, for gosh sakes. Don't take your legacy and walk away from it. Don't take your legacy and fumble it. The best thing you can possibly do is secure that database and start involving somebody else earlier to start transitioning your workload over to another agent, and have a buyers or have an agreement in place, have a team agreement in place, so that I'm giving you these leads and I'll help nurture this lead. But for goodness sakes, you better let go of the fact that you think you're going to make a full commission on your deals going forward. You're not. You're going to become a referral agent, and someone else is going to work your database, and you have to get your mind around that. I hope that you found the tips and suggestions in this segment useful. In summary, here's the deal. You have to have awareness, and you have to be honest about your own assessment, right? And this is why this is complicated, because many of us are highly siloed, and we're not talking to anybody else about our business development or the status of our business or what our challenges are. Sometimes we want to hide those things because we don't want to appear weak. I'll tell you, find somebody to talk to about these issues. If it's not your broker, then it's your office manager. And if it's not that, maybe it's a colleague or a coach. Do yourself a favor. Let go of all of the emotional baggage associated with this growth mindset. You should be experiencing this through the arc of your entire professional career. If you're not learning something every week or every month, then you're going to be at a real disadvantage when it comes to growth. Now, this doesn't mean you jump at every flashy thing. That's not what I said. But you have to be aware of what's going on. And most importantly, you have to be aware of where you are. Where are you in this continuum? Are you struggling with the basics of database administration? Have you mastered system and process? Do you understand what the basic core tenets of great leadership look like? And what are some of the exercises and things you can do around that? There's a ton packed in this video. If you have any questions or any problems, for gosh sakes, get on my calendar. As always, I'm available to help you.